Why did the desert always seem louder at night? Maybe it was the silence, how it pressed against the mind until every heartbeat, every breath, felt like thunder. Detective Reyna Voss stood by her unmarked cruiser, staring into the black horizon of the Mojave. The wind moved over the sand in long, whispering waves, and in that whisper she could hear her thoughts. Too many of them, too loud. She wasn't supposed to be out here alone, not tonight. But she had trusted the wrong man. Her partner, Agent Marlowe, had told her the lead was solid, a handoff connected to the stolen munitions case that had been eating her division alive for months. He said the contact would meet them off-grid, near the old mining stretch north of Red Rock Canyon. Low risk, he'd said, just a conversation. Now his SUV was gone, and her radio was dead. The air smelled of gasoline. It took her half a second too long to realize it wasn't from her car. "Don't move," a voice said behind her. Male, calm, cold, the kind of voice that came from someone who had already killed before. She turned slowly. The man was tall, gaunt, dressed in dark tactical clothing that didn't belong to any uniform she knew. His face was shadowed beneath a cap, his eyes unreadable. "Detective Voss," he said, almost polite. "Been waiting for you." Her pulse jumped. "Who are you?" He smiled. "The ending." He swung the metal rod faster than she could step back. The impact exploded across the side of her skull, stars, white heat, blackness swallowing light. She hit the dirt hard, the world tilting sideways. When she opened her eyes again, she was on her knees, wrists tied behind a rusted steel post, her body soaked in something cold and chemical. Gasoline dripped down her cheek. The smell was everywhere. She blinked, fighting through the fog in her head, her hair plastered against her face. The portable light the man had set up painted the clearing in a harsh, sterile white. Every sound was amplified, the creak of the rope, the shift of his boots, the whisper of the wind crawling over the rocks. He was humming to himself, some old tune, out of place, terrifying in its gentleness. "Please," her voice cracked, "you don't have to do this." The man laughed soft, almost kind. "That's the thing, detective, I really do." He flicked open a lighter, flame blooming against the night. And that was when the dog growled. It was low, deep, primal, not the sound of warning, the sound of judgment. The killer froze, head tilting. He scanned the darkness, eyes narrowing. "What was?" He never finished the sentence. Out of the black came motion, fast, silent, inevitable. 90 pounds of fury slammed into him from the side. The lighter flew from his hand as Shadow, the German shepherd, hit him like a bullet. The man screamed as the dog's jaws locked on his arm, teeth sinking into muscle. The lighter tumbled end over end through the air, hit the sand, and the world erupted into flame. "No!" Reyna's scream was swallowed by the roar. The gasoline on the ground ignited in a violent circle around her. The heat was instant, alive, reaching for her with greedy orange hands. And then another shadow moved through the fire. He came through the flames like something pulled from legend, a man in navy fatigues, lean, fast, eyes cold and steady. He didn't hesitate, didn't even flinch. The heat kissed his skin, but he was already moving. He reached her, his combat knife flashing once, slicing the rope from her wrists. "Hold your breath," he said. She didn't argue. He cut her ankles free, caught her as her legs gave out, and hauled her into his arms. The flames bent around them, licking the air where she had been seconds before. He carried her through the smallest break in the fire, every step driven by raw instinct. When they hit the sand, he threw himself over her, shielding her from the sparks that rained like molten rain. For a second there was only sound, the hiss of fire, the wind, her heartbeat. Then his voice again, calm, controlled, "You're safe." He wasn't lying. When she looked up, his face was cut from steel, harsh lines, shadowed by the flickering light. His eyes, pale gray, scanned the perimeter before returning to hers. "Can you move?" "I think so," her voice shook. "Who are you?" Nolan Jones, he said simply, Navy SEAL. The dog barked once sharp, commanding. Nolan's head snapped toward the sound. The killer was still alive, pinned beneath shadow, the dog's teeth buried deep in the man's shoulder. Hold, Nolan ordered. The dog obeyed, growling low, a rumble like thunder in the chest of something ancient. Nolan walked toward the man, his Glock drawn, his expression empty. If you move, he said, voice low, he finishes. The killer froze, eyes wide. Reyna watched as the SEAL cuffed the man, stripped him of his weapon, and stood there for a moment, staring down at him like he was trying to understand the anatomy of evil. Then he looked at her, and the soldier became human again. Her teeth chattered. She was freezing. The gasoline that had soaked her was now pulling heat from her body, the desert night biting deep. Nolan unzipped his jacket and wrapped it around her. It was still warm, heavy, smelling faintly of sand and engine oil. He pulled the hood over her head, tucking it gently beneath her chin. "Stay awake," he said. She blinked up at him. "Why?" "Because you're going into shock." He wasn't wrong. The world felt far away, the sound of fire, the wind, his voice, all blurring together. She tried to focus, but her hands were trembling too badly. Nolan glanced at the killer, unconscious now, and made a quick decision. "We're moving." He grabbed the man by the collar, dragging him upright, then looked back at her. "Can you walk?" She tried, but her knees folded. He caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily into a fireman's carry. "Shadow," he called. The dog fell in behind, silent, his breath steady despite the firelight dancing across his fur. They moved into the darkness, away from the blaze. The desert swallowed them whole. For minutes, maybe hours, there was only the rhythm of Nolan's footsteps, the crunch of gravel, the faint panting of the dog. Reyna hung on his shoulder, half-conscious, her mind drifting between fear and disbelief. She'd seen death before, stared it in the eyes, but this was something else. A stranger had stepped through fire for her. And she hadn't even asked his name. When he finally stopped, the air was colder. The wind was softer. She lifted her head. He stood before a jagged rock wall, brushing aside a curtain of dry brambles to reveal a narrow cleft. He ducked inside, carrying her into a hidden canyon no wider than a hallway. The walls blocked the wind, trapping a small pocket of stillness. He set her down gently on the sand and secured the killer to an iron bolt embedded in the wall with a carabiner. The man groaned once, then went silent. "Don't move," Nolan said to him, and the dog's growl reinforced the point. Nolan turned back to Reyna. He cracked a chemical light stick, flooding the canyon with a dim green glow. It painted everything ghostly, his face, the rock, the dog's sharp eyes. Her lips were blue, her clothes still soaked. "You have to get out of those," he said. Her breath caught. "Excuse me." "They're soaked in gas. You'll freeze." His tone was clinical, matter-of-fact. He wasn't looking at her as a man would, he was assessing survival. He handed her a plastic bag and a folded set of black thermals from his pack. "Change. I'll check the perimeter." He turned away, giving her privacy. Reyna's fingers fumbled with the knots and buttons. Her skin burned where the gasoline had touched. She stripped the ruined clothes, pulled on the thermals, too big but warm, and wrapped his jacket back around her. For the first time in hours, her hands stopped shaking. When he came back, she was sitting on the ground, hugging her knees. "Let me see your hands," he said. She offered them wordlessly. The rope had cut deep into her wrists. He cleaned the raw skin with antiseptic, wrapped it in gauze with careful, steady hands. His touch was precise, gentle, but detached. The kind of touch that came from a man who had seen too much to hesitate. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't answer, just packed away the kit. Then he looked at the killer. "Who sent you?" The man laughed weakly. "Go to hell." Nolan searched him, finding a knife strapped to his leg, a cheap wallet, car keys, a burner phone. He tossed the phone to the ground, snapping it in half with one motion. Reyna noticed the knife, a matte black combat blade with a stylized logo etched into the handle. Her breath hitched. "Let me see that," she said. Nolan turned it over. She pointed. "That logo, that's Ryan Tactical, Vegas-based private security firm. They do quiet work for high rollers, and rumor is for whoever pays enough." Nolan's expression darkened. "You know them." "I was investigating weapons theft from Nellie's Air Force Base, javelins, launchers, full kits going missing. My partner said we had a lead." She swallowed hard. "He set me up. Marlowe sold me out." The words cracked something open inside her, a mixture of rage and disbelief. Nolan said nothing, but his jaw tightened. "Your partner thinks you're dead. The man who sent this one thinks you're dead. We'll keep it that way." She looked at him, this stranger, this soldier who'd stepped through fire. "Why are you helping me?" He met her eyes. "Because someone has to." She didn't have the strength to argue. She just nodded. Outside, the desert wind howled again, low, endless, carrying the sound of something ancient and patient. In the flickering green light, the killer sat slumped, the dog standing guard before him, silent, watchful, loyal. And in that moment, Reyna understood something simple and terrifying. She was alive because of these two, a man and his dog. She didn't know their story, their pain, or what ghosts they carried. But she could see it in his eyes when the light caught them, the same ghost she carried. And somewhere in that wordless understanding, in the quiet space between fear and gratitude, something inside her began to heal. What neither of them knew was that this night, this fire, was only the beginning. Because the man she trusted most wasn't done with her yet. And the storm coming for them, all would burn far hotter than gasoline. Why did he look like he'd already buried a part of himself? The green light from the chemstick painted Nolan's face in ghostly hues, sharp along the scars that tracked his jaw. He sat opposite the captive, calm and silent, but his stillness felt dangerous. Even Shadow seemed to sense it, his ears flat, muscles taut, a low hum vibrating in his chest. Reyna wrapped his heavy jacket tighter around herself. Her skin still burned where the gasoline had touched it, but the cold in her chest ran deeper. Betrayal wasn't new to her. Cops learned early how fragile loyalty could be, but this felt different, personal. The prisoner's eyes flicked from Nolan to her and back again. "You think you're heroes," he rasped. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Nolan's voice was soft, almost too soft. "Then enlighten me." The man smiled, his teeth shadowed red. "You'll be dead before sunrise." Shadow growled once, and Nolan's hand dropped to the dog's shoulder, steadying him. "He doesn't like when people make promises they can't keep," Nolan murmured. The killer said nothing after that. Minutes passed, each one stretched thin by the cold wind seeping through the rocks. Reyna's wrists throbbed beneath the bandages, but what hurt most was her own mind replaying the image of Marlowe's face when he'd handed her the case file this morning. "Trust me, Ray, this leads solid." She trusted him through 7 years of joint cases, through the night shifts, through his jokes about how she was half soldier, half machine. Now she knew what those smiles had been hiding. "Why are you out here, Nolan?" she asked quietly. "Men like you don't just wander into the desert with a dog." He didn't look at her when he answered. "Training, clearing my head." She almost laughed. "You save women from execution when you're clearing your head." That made him glance up. His eyes were unreadable steel and sorrow all at once. "I don't plan rescues. I just don't walk away from screams." Something in her chest loosened. It wasn't gratitude, yet something more dangerous. Respect. The wind outside shifted, carrying a sound she almost missed. A distant hum, mechanical, steady. She tensed. "You hear that?" Nolan was already moving. He crouched near the canyon mouth, listening. The hum grew louder, a rhythm beneath the wind, a vehicle engine. "They're coming back," he said. Reyna's pulse kicked. "For him." "For you." He doused the chem light with a twist of his hand, plunging the canyon into darkness. "Move," he whispered. He hauled the killer to his feet, checked the man's cuffs, then looked at Reyna. "Stay behind me. Shadow, rear." They slipped out into the night. The desert sky was ink black, stars dulled by a gathering haze, the kind of stillness that meant a storm was brewing. Half a mile away, headlights crested a ridge, cutting long fingers of light across the sand. 2 vehicles, maybe 3. Reyna felt the old muscle memory rise, the part of her that had lived through Fallujah before she traded her fatigues for a badge. The part that knew exactly how small she was against the machinery of death. "What's the play?" she whispered. Nolan scanned the terrain, every movement precise. "We keep distance. I don't want a firefight with you half frozen." He guided them along the canyon's edge, the dogs silent at their heels, the captive stumbling between them. The ground was uneven, carved by years of flash floods, perfect for disappearing if you knew how to move. The headlights slowed near the burned clearing. Figures spilled out, black silhouettes against the fire's dying glow. Reyna crouched behind a ridge of rock, breath held. She could make out 4, no, 5 men. One knelt, running his hand across the sand where the lighter had fallen. Another pointed toward the faint trail of bootprints leading away. They were tracking. The leader turned, and even from the distance she could see how the others deferred to him. Broad shoulders, shaved head, movements controlled, deliberate. He wore no insignia. "That one," Nolan murmured. "You see how the rest move when he moves." Reyna nodded. "You know him." "Not yet," he said, "but I know his kind. The kind who hunted people." The men fanned out, sweeping with infrared lights. It wouldn't take long. Nolan's jaw flexed once. Decision made. He turned to the prisoner. "You're done talking." Before the man could respond, Nolan's fist connected with his temple. The hit was clean, silent, efficient. The body sagged into the sand, unconscious. Reyna's eyes widened. "You just—" He was slowing us down. Nolan hoisted the limp form over his shoulder and started down the ravine. "And I'm not leaving him alive for them." She followed, the old instinct overriding hesitation. In war, morality waited until morning. They moved for almost an hour through the maze of stone and shadow until the headlights were nothing but memory. When Nolan finally stopped, it was at the base of a sandstone bluff, where a narrow fissure split the rock. He laid the captive down, checked his pulse, steady, and tied him to a metal spike jutting from the wall. "He'll live," he said, "for now." Reyna leaned against the rock, her breath clouding the air. "You could have killed him." He met her gaze. "I don't kill unless I have to." The words were simple, but the way he said them carried weight, like they came from experience he wished he could erase. Shadow nudged his knee, whining softly. Nolan rested a hand on the dog's head. "Good boy." The gesture was small, tender, almost reverent. Watching it, Reyna felt something twist inside her, the ache of remembering her own K-9 partner from years ago, the one she'd lost in an IED blast that still echoed in her sleep. She blinked hard. Nolan broke the silence. "That logo on the knife, Ryan Tactical." "Yeah," she said. "They're not just security. Word is, they've got connections inside the base." He nodded once, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. Deckard Ryan. The name meant nothing to her, but it hit him like a punch. His shoulders tensed. His eyes went somewhere far away. "You know him," she said quietly. He didn't answer. The wind rose, hissing through the canyon mouth. In the distance thunder rolled, dry thunder, the kind that promised a sandstorm. Reyna moved closer, lowering her voice. "If he's tied to the stolen weapons, then Thorne's our link. Elias Thorne, arms dealer, Vegas base of operations. That's who Marlowe was really working for." Nolan's head snapped toward her. "You're sure?" "Positive," she swallowed. "I've been chasing Thorne's shipments for months. Every time we close in, evidence vanishes. Someone's cleaning up his trail inside the department. Now I know who. Marlowe, her own partner. The realization burned hotter than the fire had. Nolan studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Your partner thinks you're ashes in a crater. Let's keep it that way." How? By disappearing first. He stood, moving with silent purpose, and began packing the essentials: ammo, medical kit, rations. His movements were mechanical, practiced. The rhythm of someone who'd rebuilt himself from ruins before. Reyna watched him, something tightening in her chest. "You've done this before, haven't you?" "Done what?" "Carried ghosts." He froze for half a second, then zipped the pack. "We all carry them. Some just bark louder than others." He glanced down at Shadow, whose ears twitched at the sound of his name. A faint smile touched Reyna's lips despite the fear crawling in her stomach. They moved before dawn. The sky was a deep violet bruise stretching above the desert. The prisoner, still bound and barely conscious, stumbled between them as they climbed the ridge. The wind carried sand that stung her face like glass shards. By the time the first edge of sunlight broke the horizon, they reached Nolan's truck, a matte gray pickup camouflaged beneath a camo tarp in a dry wash. He shoved the captive into the back seat, Shadow taking position beside him, then opened the passenger door for Reyna. "Get in." She hesitated. "Where are we going?" "Someplace safe," he said. His tone left no room for argument. The engine rumbled to life, low and restrained. He kept the lights off, navigating by memory and moonlight. The desert slid by, empty miles of ghost country. Reyna watched his profile, the way the faint glow of the dash carved shadows across his cheekbones. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like someone who'd stopped believing in salvation but still did the work anyway. After a long silence, she asked, "Ryan Tactical, you said Deckard Ryan, who is he to you?" For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, without looking away from the road, he said, "He was my swim buddy and Bud my brother." The words landed like stones in the quiet cab. "Was?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "He died officially 10 years ago. Guess that was a lie." The wind howled outside, rattling the truck bed. Inside, the air went still. Reyna studied his face, saw the crack that ran through his composure. Not weakness, history, pain polished into control. "He's the reason you're out here," she said softly. "Not training." He didn't deny it. When they reached the outskirts of Vegas, dawn was a thin, pale line behind the mountains. Nolan turned off onto a deserted industrial road lined with abandoned warehouses. He drove into one, the massive steel door rolling shut behind them. Light flooded the interior as he flicked a switch. The place was immaculate, racks of equipment, comms gear, a cot, a workbench. Not a hideout, a base. "You live here?" she asked. He gave a faint half-smile. "Sometimes." He secured the prisoner to a steel support beam, checked the locks, then gestured toward a small shower room. "There's hot water, use it." Reyna hesitated. The exhaustion hit all at once, the smell of smoke still clinging to her hair, the blood dried on her wrists, the weight of betrayal sinking like lead. She nodded and slipped away. The water stung her skin, washing away gasoline and grit, leaving her raw but clean. When she stepped back into the main room wearing a plain t-shirt and borrowed cargo pants, Nolan was sitting on a crate, cleaning his rifle. He looked up. "Better." She nodded. "Good," he said, "because the moment we rest, they'll find us." Her heart sank. "You think they tracked us?" "I think Thorne doesn't leave witnesses." He tapped the broken burner phone on the workbench. "And I think I made a mistake leaving a trail in the canyon." A low growl rumbled from Shadow's throat. Nolan stood, his eyes narrowing. "Storm's coming," he said. Outside, the sky had gone a strange amber gray. Wind began to beat against the steel walls. The sound wasn't just weather, it was cover. Reyna walked to the window, the city's neon glow smeared by rising dust. What happens now? He looked at her, really looked for the first time. Now we stop running. There was a moment of stillness, broken only by the distant boom of thunder. Then he added, quieter, but not for revenge, for truth. She met his gaze. You think truth's still alive in a world like this? He gave the smallest shrug. It's buried, we just dig better than they do. The first grains of sand hit the window like rain. The storm was almost here. Reyna reached for her sidearm, checked the magazine, and felt the old steadiness settle in. Whatever came next, she wasn't the same woman who'd begged for her life in a ring of fire. The detective was gone. The soldier was back. And somewhere out in the storm, the men who tried to burn her alive were already coming. She tightened the strap of Nolan's jacket around her shoulders and whispered to no one. Let them try. How do you know when you've stopped running and started fighting? Reyna didn't know the answer. Maybe it was somewhere between the thunder rolling across the Mojave and the steady pulse of her own heart. The warehouse lights flickered once, twice, before Nolan killed them entirely. Darkness swallowed the space, leaving only the rhythmic tap of sand against the steel walls. Shadow stood motionless near the door, his ears twitching at every vibration. Nolan crouched by the workbench, one hand resting on the dog's shoulder, the other flipping open a hardened case. His movements were quiet, deliberate, ritualistic. Inside the case were magazines, spare optics, and a folded map smeared with fingerprints. Reyna leaned against the cold wall, still wearing his oversized jacket. You keep all this ready, like you were waiting for a war. Nolan's voice came back low. War never really ends, it just changes uniforms. He didn't look at her as he spoke. He was checking rounds, laying each one out in neat, precise rows. Every motion said control, but beneath that calm she could see it, the tension hiding behind his shoulders. The kind that came from guilt too old to explain. You think they'll hit tonight? She asked. I think they already have. He reached for a small radio unit, adjusted the dial. Static hissed, then cleared into faint chatter, unmarked frequencies, encrypted. A voice came through, male, clipped, professional. Team Alpha confirming package site compromised. Suspect extraction underway. Reyna felt her stomach tighten. That's them. Nolan nodded once. Ryan tactical comms. They're hunting their own failure. Meaning us. Meaning you, he said softly. But they'll get both of us if they can. Lightning flashed beyond the narrow window, lighting up his face for an instant. It wasn't fear that moved across his features. It was recognition. He'd been hunted before. Reyna's mind raced, trying to piece the puzzle together. Marlowe's betrayal, the assassin's knife with the Ryan tactical logo, the missing weapons from Nellie's. It all pointed to something bigger, a network that moved in shadows where the law couldn't reach. Ryan Tactical was your brother's company, she said quietly. You told me that. He nodded. Deckard Ryan, we called him Deck. What happened to him? Nolan hesitated, his eyes fixed on the map spread before him. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a decade. We served together, same platoon, same missions. He saved my life more than once. Then one day he walked away from the teams. No warning, said he was done fighting other people's wars. And you? Reyna asked. I stayed, he said simply. It's all I knew. She studied him, the edges of his silhouette defined by the faint blue light leaking through the storm shutters. You think he's part of this now, the trafficking? Nolan's jaw flexed. I think he's lost, and I think someone like Thorne doesn't just buy silence, he buys loyalty. Outside, thunder cracked again, closer this time. The sandstorm was moving fast, sweeping across the city like a wall of smoke. The warehouse shuddered under the pressure. Reyna walked closer to the window, watching the horizon disappear. They'll use the storm as cover. Exactly. Nolan slid a pistol across the workbench toward her. Full mag, check your sights. She caught it, her hand steady. You think they'll breach the door? They won't knock first. A sudden buzz cut through the darkness, the vibration of a phone on the metal table. Nolan's head snapped toward it. His civilian line, the one he never used. He glanced at the screen. Deckard Ryan. He stared at the name for a long moment, then answered. The voice on the other end was strained, desperate. Nolan, listen to me. You have to get out, now. Reyna moved closer, hearing only fragments through the speaker. Static, urgency, the sound of wind on the other end. What did you do, Deck? Nolan asked quietly. I didn't know, the man's voice cracked. Thorn, he's cleaning house. That hit team you caught, the guy had a tracker subdermal, they pinged it, they know where you are. Reyna's heart dropped. How close? Deck's answer came in a single broken word. Minutes. Nolan's eyes flicked to her. Every muscle in his body went still. We're gone, he said, then hung up. Before Reyna could speak, Shadow lifted his head and growled, a deep primal warning that vibrated in her bones. The roof creaked above them. A faint metallic clank echoed through the rafters. Nolan's voice was a whisper. They're here. The next sound was unmistakable, a boot landing on steel. Reyna's instincts screamed. She dropped low, pistol raised, scanning the shadows. The world outside howled as the storm hit full force, sand hammering against the warehouse like rain on a drum. Another thud, then another. They're breaching, Nolan muttered. He yanked a heavy tactical vest from a rack and tossed one to her. Plates are in, don't hesitate. She caught it, sliding the straps into place, her breath quickening but her hands steady. The air inside the warehouse grew heavy, dense with static and adrenaline. Then the door exploded inward. The blast tore through the dark with a blinding flash and a thunderclap of metal. Shrapnel scattered across the floor. Dust and grit filled the air. Reyna hit the ground, covering her head, ears ringing. Shadow barked once, loud, furious, alive. Nolan was already moving. He pulled her behind a stack of steel crates, his rifle pressed tight to his shoulder. The air was a chaos of sand and smoke, visibility dropping to almost nothing. Stay on my six, he shouted. The storm outside poured into the breach, turning the air into a living thing. Through the haze, beams of white light cut across the room, flashlights mounted on rifles. Shapes moved within them. 4, maybe 5. Muffled commands, the sound of suppressed fire. Rounds sparked off metal inches from Reyna's head. She returned fire, short, controlled bursts. The recoil steadied her breathing, brought her back to the rhythm she'd learned years ago in uniform. Nolan flanked left, using the storm as cover. Shadow darted into the fog like a ghost, disappearing between pallets and machinery. A scream followed, short, sharp, then silence. Reyna risked a glance through the dust. A shape was moving toward the side door, massive, fluid, precise. The leader, the one she'd seen at the fire. Nolan saw him too. That's Kale, he muttered, Thorn's hammer. Kale raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Nolan's shot cracked through the noise. The round hit close, forcing him back into cover. Go, Nolan yelled, back exit. They sprinted across the warehouse, ducking behind machinery. Bullets tore through the air around them, ripping sparks from the steel. Shadow appeared beside them, blood on his muzzle but eyes bright, alive. They reached the south door, locked. Nolan slammed a shoulder into it, once, twice, and it gave way. The world outside was a wall of sand. The storm roared like a living beast, reducing the city to a swirling void of brown and gold. Stay close, he shouted. Reyna grabbed his hand without thinking. His fingers locked around hers, strong and certain, grounding her in the chaos. Together they plunged into the storm. The world vanished. Sand filled her mouth, stung her eyes. The wind ripped her voice away when she tried to speak. She could only follow the pull of his hand, the rhythm of his movement. Shadow pressed against her leg, guiding, shielding. They ran blind through a world that no longer had shape. Every gust felt like a shove from an invisible hand. Then shelter, the pressure eased, the wind dulled. She stumbled into him, colliding against his back. He was pushing open something heavy, a metal door embedded in the side of a concrete structure. They tumbled through. He slammed it shut behind them, sealing out the roar. Silence. A different kind of darkness surrounded them now, thick, absolute. Reyna gasped, coughing, spitting grit from her mouth. Nolan cracked another chemlight, flooding the space with green. It was small, low-ceilinged, lined with rusted pipes and concrete walls. "Where the hell are we?" she asked between breaths. "Flood control bunker," he said. "Old Cold War infrastructure. I used it for training once. No one knows it's here." Shadow shook himself, sending a spray of dust into the dim light. The dog's tongue lolled, panting, but his eyes were alert. Reyna slid down the wall, every muscle shaking from adrenaline. "We can't keep running forever, Nolan. They'll just keep coming." He sat across from her, back to the concrete, elbows resting on his knees. The chem light flickered between them, painting half his face in shadow. "Then we stop running." "You mean we fight?" He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes was enough. A long silence stretched. The only sound was the dog's breathing and the faint hum of the old ventilation fans overhead. Finally Reyna said, "You knew he'd send them, didn't you? Thorn, you knew this wouldn't stop." Nolan nodded once. "He's not afraid of the law, only exposure. You said your partner worked for him. What did he want from you?" "Evidence," she said bitterly. "The files I collected. I thought we were getting a warrant. Instead, he handed me over to a hired killer." "Then that evidence is still out there." "Maybe," she said, "but without a link to Thorn, it's nothing." Nolan stared at the floor, thinking. Then, "There's a link, my brother." Her head snapped up. "Deckard." He met her gaze. "He's not dead. He's running Thorn's logistics, and if that knife was from his men, he's already in deep." Reyna's pulse quickened. "You're going after him." "I'm going to make him choose who he really is." The flickering light caught the faint tremor in his hand before he clenched it into a fist. Reyna studied him, and for the first time she saw something that wasn't soldier or survivor. It was pain, pure, unguarded pain. "You still care about him," she said quietly. "He was my brother," Nolan replied. "Some debts don't dissolve." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The bunker hummed with the sound of the storm raging somewhere above them. Finally, Reyna whispered, "So what happens when you find him?" Nolan's voice was calm, but the words landed like steel. "Then the truth comes home." He reached into his vest, pulled out a folded map marked in faded red ink. "Ryan Tactical's headquarters, Vegas Strip Tower. If Thorn's moving weapons through that network, the proof starts there." Reyna nodded slowly. "You're planning to walk right into his den." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Sometimes the only way out is through." Shadow rested his head on Nolan's knee, tail thumping once, a quiet affirmation. Reyna watched the two of them, soldier and dog, both cut from the same silent loyalty, and realized that somewhere in the chaos, her fear had changed shape. It wasn't terror anymore. It was purpose. When Nolan finally looked up, the flickering chem light caught both their faces. "Get some rest," he said. "We move at dawn." Reyna leaned back against the wall, exhaustion tugging at her eyelids. "If dawn ever comes." "It always does," he said softly. "The question is what it finds." Outside, the storm screamed against the sealed steel door, but inside the bunker the air was still. For the first time since the fire, Reyna felt a strange kind of peace. Not safety, just clarity. Somewhere above them, men like Marlowe and Thorne thought they controlled the board. But they had no idea what it meant to fight for something that still mattered. And as Reyna drifted toward sleep, her last thought was of Shadow, loyal eyes half open, guarding the darkness, and the quiet soldier beside her who had already risked everything for a stranger. Sometimes, she thought, heroes don't wear capes or badges. Sometimes they walk through fire, silent and scarred, carrying ghosts that aren't even theirs. And they keep walking anyway. What do you say to a man you once called brother when you might have to kill him? The bunker was cold by dawn. Pale light filtered through the vent slits, cutting thin gold lines across the concrete floor. Reyna woke to the faint sound of Nolan cleaning his weapon. The rhythm was soft, deliberate, the kind of sound that came from ritual more than habit. Shadow lay beside him, head on his paws, eyes half open, always listening. For a moment, Reyna didn't move. She watched the soldier in silence, the way he carried himself, every gesture measured, efficient. But beneath the discipline there was something fragile, something human. "Sleep overrated," she murmured. He didn't look up. "Not when you've earned it." "I wasn't sure I did." "You're alive," he said. "That's a start." She pushed herself upright, stretching the stiffness from her neck. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust. In the faint light she could see the outlines of maps pinned to the far wall, marked with red grease pencil, routes, times, coordinates. Every inch of it was strategy and grief. "How long have you been tracking him?" she asked. "Since the day they said he was dead." His tone didn't change. "Deck vanished on a mission in Sudan. We found the wreckage, but not his body. I knew it didn't add up." "And no one believed you." He gave a small, humorless smile. "The Navy doesn't like ghosts in their paperwork." She nodded slowly. "You think he staged it?" "I think he wanted out, and someone like Thorne offered him a way." Reyna exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "So we find Ryan Tactical, we find Deckard." Nolan looked at her, eyes unreadable. "You don't have to come." She gave a short laugh. "You pulled me out of fire. I'm not sitting out the rest of the war." For the first time in hours, something almost like amusement touched his face. It didn't last long, but it softened him. "You were military once." "Air Force, combat search and rescue, Iraq, then police work. Thought I'd left the chaos behind." She paused. "Guess chaos didn't get the memo." Nolan stood, tightening the strap on his pack. "Then you know the rule. Don't fight what you can't finish." Reyna met his eyes. "Then we finish it." They moved out as the storm began to break. The desert was littered with debris, sand piled in waves across the road. The sun bled red through the haze, staining the world in bruised color. They walked in silence to the truck, the wind still whispering across the dunes like an unfinished prayer. Shadow leapt into the backseat as Nolan started the engine. The radio stayed silent, no music, no chatter, only the hum of tires and the heartbeat of a road that stretched toward a reckoning. Hours passed. The city appeared first as a shimmer, then as spires rising from the dust. Las Vegas, a mirage of glass and sin. The closer they got, the heavier Reyna's chest felt. Ryan Tactical's headquarters loomed on the South Strip, a black glass tower that caught the morning light and threw it back in shards. It looked sterile, controlled. Like everything inside, it was polished to hide the dirt beneath. Nolan parked 2 blocks away in an alley lined with dumpsters and forgotten neon signs. "We go in quiet," he said. "Back entrance, service level. Deckard will be watching the front." Reyna checked her weapon. "You really think he'll talk?" "I think he owes me that much." They moved fast, weaving through back streets until the tower filled the sky above them. The service lot was nearly empty, guarded by a single camera Nolan disabled with a small EMP charge. They slipped inside. The air changed instantly, cold, sterile, humming with electricity. Marble floors, mirrored walls, corridors lined with biometric locks. Nolan moved with the ease of someone who'd memorized the layout long before stepping inside. Reyna followed, her nerves tightening with every step. They reached an elevator at the far end of the hall. Nolan swiped a stolen card, and the doors slid open with a whisper. "Top floor," he said. The ride was silent except for the faint hum of the lift. Reyna stared at her reflection in the glass, hair tangled, bruises faint beneath her skin. She didn't look like a cop anymore, or a soldier, just someone who'd seen too much and decided to keep going anyway. When the doors opened, she felt it before she saw it, the weight of power. The office was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the desert beyond, and standing at the far end behind a sleek black desk was Deckard Ryan. He hadn't aged the way most men did. His hair was shorter, darker, his shoulders broader, but the eyes, those were the same. Steel gray like Nolan's, a mirror of pain and history. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Deckard smiled. "I was wondering when you'd find me." Nolan stepped forward, gun holstered but hand ready. "You don't look dead." "I get that a lot," Deckard said. "You look tired." "War does that." "War?" Deckard chuckled. "You still think this is about war. Brother, this is business." The word hit harder than it should have. Reyna stepped up beside Nolan, her voice sharp. "You tried to have me killed." Deckard's eyes flicked toward her, measuring. "Detective Reyna Voss, you should thank me. It was supposed to be quick." "You call burning alive quick?" she shot back. He didn't answer, just poured himself a drink from the decanter on the table. "You're both standing here. I'd say it worked out." Nolan's voice was a razor. "Thorn using you, you know that." Deckard's smile faded. "You think I don't know what Thorn is? You think I don't know where the bodies are buried? I built this company to keep the monsters from eating what's left of us." "By selling weapons to cartels," Reyna demanded. "By surviving," he snapped. "You of all people should understand that." Nolan took a slow step closer. "You disappeared, Deck, left me holding your coffin." "I had no choice." "You always had a choice." The room went still. The silence between them was older than any war, two men bound by blood and betrayal, standing on opposite sides of the same wound. Then Deckard's tone changed, lower, almost pleading. "You don't know what Thorn can do. You have no idea what's coming. If you walk out of here, you won't last a day." "Then come with us," Nolan said quietly. For a flicker of a moment, something broke in Deckard's eyes. Then it hardened again. "It's too late." Reyna felt the shift before she heard it, the faint whine of suppressed gunfire. The window behind them shattered, glass exploding inward. Nolan tackled her to the floor as a round buried itself in the wall where her head had been. "Snipers!" he shouted. Deckard dove behind the desk. "He found me. Thorns here." Nolan fired twice through the broken glass, rolling to cover. Shadow barked furiously, hackles raised, body between Reyna and the window. "Back exit," Nolan barked. Deckard grabbed a hard drive from his desk and yanked open a side panel in the wall. "Service tunnel, leads to the parking sublevel." Reyna was on her feet, adrenaline cutting through fear. They sprinted through the narrow passage, gunfire echoing behind them. The walls trembled with impact rounds. The tunnel ended at a stairwell that plunged into darkness. Deckard led the way, shadow bounding ahead. The air grew heavier, laced with oil and concrete. At the bottom, Deckard swiped a keycard. A heavy blast door hissed open, revealing a dim underground garage. For a second, Reyna thought they were clear. Then the lights flickered on. Men stepped from the shadows, black uniforms, masks, rifles raised, 20 at least. And in the center, calm and smiling, stood Elias Thorn. He was older than she expected, silver hair, pale eyes that gleamed with the kind of intelligence that made monsters look civilized. He wore a tailored suit beneath a ballistic vest, power wrapped in precision. "Mr. Ryan," Thorn said, voice smooth as glass, "you've been very busy." Deckard froze, breath shallow. "Elias." "Spare me." Thorn's gaze moved to Nolan and Reyna. "Ah, the detective and the ghost soldier, two loose ends I've been eager to tie." Nolan's weapon was already up. "You're not walking out of here." Thorn smiled faintly. "Neither are you." Shadow's growl filled the silence, deep and relentless. The soldiers shifted uneasily. For one breathless moment, the world balanced on a trigger pull. Then everything happened at once. The power cut, total blackout. Muzzle flashes lit the dark like lightning. The sound was deafening, gunfire, shouting, echoing chaos. Reyna dropped behind a pillar, returning fire blind. Shadow lunged at a figure closing in, the sound of struggle tearing through the dark. "Nolan," she shouted, trying to find him in the chaos. "I'm here," his voice was close, controlled. "Get to the exit." "I'm not leaving you." Wasn't a request. She turned just as a figure grabbed her from behind. She twisted, driving her elbow back hard. The man's grip faltered and she shot once, clean, final. The emergency lights flickered on. Half the men were down, smoke hung thick in the air. Thorn was gone. Deckard stood near the blast door, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading through his sleeve. "He's running," he shouted. Nolan reached him in 2 strides. "Where?" "Helipad, roof." Without a word, they moved. Reyna followed, lungs burning, heart hammering. The elevator shaft loomed ahead, its power cut. Nolan ripped open the service ladder. "Go," he ordered. They climbed 3 floors, 5, 10. The air grew thin. Wind howled through the shattered upper levels. When Reyna pulled herself onto the roof, dawn was breaking through smoke. And standing by a sleek black helicopter, with his coat flapping in the wind, was Elias Thorn. He turned at the sound of their arrival, the rising sun cutting a halo behind him. "You're persistent," he said calmly. "I almost admire it." Nolan raised his weapon. "It ends here." Thorn smiled, stepping into the chopper. "No, Lieutenant, it only begins." The helicopter lifted off, blades kicking up a storm of dust and debris. Reyna covered her eyes, shouting over the roar. "He's getting away." Nolan fired 3 rounds. 2 struck the fuselage, the third shattering a rotor sensor. The craft wobbled, smoke trailing, but it didn't fall. Deckard limped forward, gripping his shoulder. "You'll never catch him now. He's heading to Yucca Site, old nuclear test grounds. That's where he's moving the weapons." Reyna turned to him, panting. "Then we go there." Nolan looked at his brother for a long moment. "You're coming with us." Deckard's expression wavered. "After what I've done, you still trust me?" Nolan's voice was quiet. "No, but I still believe you can choose." For a second, the wind was the only sound. Then Deckard nodded. "Then let's finish it." As they watched Thorn's helicopter vanish into the rising light, Reyna realized the battle ahead wasn't just about weapons or betrayal. It was about what kind of people they would be when it was over. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache and exhaustion, she knew the answer. Sometimes redemption isn't about forgiveness. It's about finally standing your ground. How far can a person go before they break? Reyna had asked herself that question before, in war zones, in alleys where the sound of her own breathing was the only proof she was still alive. But never like this. The desert ahead of them was endless, bleached bone-white under the rising sun. The helicopter was long gone, a fatting shadow toward the western horizon. The air shimmered with heat even though dawn had barely begun. Nolan's truck tore across the dirt road, dust rising behind them in a long, ragged wake. Reyna sat in the passenger seat, watching the map flicker on a cracked tablet balanced on her knees. Deckard sat in the back, silent, one hand pressed against his blood-soaked shoulder. Shadow rested beside him, head in his lap, eyes alert and unblinking. No one spoke for miles. Finally, Reyna broke the silence. "Yucca Site's restricted. No roads, no access. How's he even getting equipment in?" Nolan's gaze stayed locked on the horizon. "Same way he gets everything else, quietly." Deckard's voice came rough, strained. "Thorn been using the old test tunnels. There's infrastructure down there, power grids, storage, sealed chambers, perfect for hiding shipments." "And the weapons?" Reyna asked. "Half of what went missing from Nellie's ended up there. The rest's already off-world." She blinked, off-world. Deckard nodded. Private buyers, orbital colonies, rogue defense contracts. Thorne, been selling to anyone who can pay in resources instead of cash. He's building a future war and no one even knows it started. Reyna glanced at Nolan. His jaw was tight, knuckles white on the steering wheel. You knew. I knew he had reach, Nolan said quietly, not how deep it went. Deckard gave a humorless laugh. You always believed in rules. That's what made you easy to break. Careful, Nolan said, not looking back. You're still breathing because I let you. Shadow's head lifted at the tone, eyes flicking between them. The silence returned, thick and electric. They drove for another hour until the road ended. Just sand, wind, and the rusted remains of warning signs half buried in dust. Yucca test range restricted. TRSBSSERS will be shot. Nolan killed the engine. The heat pressed down like a hand. This is it, he said. Reyna climbed out, boots sinking into the soft earth. The landscape stretched flat in all directions, ghost country. No sound but the hiss of wind scraping across the desert floor. Deckard limped out of the truck, pale but moving. Thorne's compound is underground, about 5 clicks east. There's a service tunnel entrance through an old bunker. If we can reach it before nightfall, we'll have cover. Nolan nodded, checking his rifle. You're leading. Deckard smirked faintly. Guess you still trust me a little. I trust the map, Nolan said. They started walking. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a mirror of heat. Each step kicked up dust that clung to their clothes, their skin, their lungs. Reyna's heartbeat echoed in her ears. She kept her pace steady, but every mile felt heavier than the last. Why'd you really join Thorne? She asked finally, not looking at Deckard. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low, almost lost in the wind. After I left the Navy, I couldn't find a way to live normal. Civilians don't understand what it means to wake up every day waiting for something that doesn't come. Thorne did. He offered purpose, money, control. And when you realized what he was really building. Deckard's jaw clenched. It was too late. I was in too deep. Every step away just brought me closer. Reyna studied him. The guilt in his voice wasn't an act. It was the kind that ate from the inside out. She knew that sound. She'd heard it in herself. The ground changed beneath their boots, harder, smoother. The sand gave way to cracked concrete. Ahead, half buried in the earth, a bunker door leaned open like a rusted wound. The metal was scorched, marked by blast scars decades old. Nolan raised a fist. We go quiet from here. They slipped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. The bunker smelled of oil, dust, and something metallic. Light filtered in through the cracks in the ceiling, illuminating long corridors lined with pipes and faded hazard signs. Deckard moved ahead, limping slightly, flashlight sweeping the darkness. Thorne used the main chamber for staging. There's a control center deeper in. If he's still here, that's where he'll be. Reyna followed, her pistol ready, every sense sharpened. The silence was wrong, too heavy, too complete. Then Shadow stopped. The dog froze mid-step, head low, body rigid. Nolan's voice dropped to a whisper. What is it? Shadow's ears twitched, then he growled. The sound was low, primal, vibrating through the air. An instant later, the world exploded. Gunfire tore through the corridor. Bullets sparked off the walls. Reyna hit the deck, returning fire toward the flashes in the dark. Nolan moved beside her, precise and fast, his rifle barking in tight bursts. Deckard dove behind a crate, shouting something she couldn't hear. The air filled with smoke and dust. Shadow lunged forward, disappearing into the haze. A scream followed, short, final. When the shooting stopped, only the echo of their breaths remained. Nolan scanned the shadows. Ambush team, they were waiting. Reyna checked her magazine, half gone. They knew we were coming. Deckard cursed under his breath. He must have pinged the tracker I was tagged with. I thought I disabled it. Nolan grabbed his shoulder. You thought wrong. I can still fix this, Deckard said. Thorn does know we survived the tower. He'll assume you're here alone, Nolan. That's his mistake. Reyna frowned. What are you saying? I can draw him out, Deckard said. He'll trust me long enough to bring you close. Nolan's expression darkened. You think I'm letting you walk back into his arms? You don't have a choice, Deckard said quietly. You want Thorn, you need me. I'm the only way in. Reyna looked between them, feeling the weight of what he was offering. It wasn't courage, it was penance. Let him do it, she said. Nolan turned to her, eyes sharp. He's lying, he's done it before. Maybe, she said, but if there's a chance he's telling the truth, we take it. We don't get another shot. For a moment, silence. Then Nolan exhaled, slow and hard. You've got 10 minutes, he said to Deckard. After that, if I don't hear from you. You'll come for me, Deckard finished. No, Nolan said, I'll come through you. Deckard nodded once, accepting the sentence. Then he disappeared into the dark. Reyna leaned against the wall, catching her breath. The silence that followed was unbearable. Every second stretched too long. You don't trust him, she said finally. I trust what he used to be, Nolan said, not what he became. She looked at him, the lines in his face carved deeper by exhaustion and years. What happens when this ends? He didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the shadows where his brother had vanished. Minutes passed. The faint hum of machinery grew louder, generators spinning up somewhere deeper in the complex. Then, a voice echoed through the corridor, filtered through loudspeakers. Lieutenant Jones, Thorn's voice purred, you've been very hard to kill. Nolan froze. Reyna's pulse spiked. Thorn's voice continued, smooth and amused. I suppose I should thank you. You've saved me the trouble of finding the leak in my house. Your brother, for instance. Reyna felt cold. Deckard, she whispered. Nolan's face was stone. Thorn's laughter filled the hall. He's quite the actor, offered to lead me right to you. I must admit, it was almost convincing. Reyna grabbed Nolan's arm. He's lying. Maybe, Nolan said, but either way this ends now. He checked his rifle, chambered around. The sound echoed like thunder. They moved fast, through corridors that bent and split deeper into the earth. The walls trembled with distant machinery. Red lights flickered along the ceiling, pulsing like a heartbeat. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, metal walkways, stacked crates, the remnants of missiles and armored drones lined in rows. At the far end stood Thorn, calm as ever, flanked by guards. And beside him, Deckard. Alive. Unarmed. Reyna's heart twisted. Nolan raised his weapon. Deck, step away. Deckard didn't move. His face was pale, eyes hollow. Thorn rested a hand on his shoulder, mock fatherly. You see, Lieutenant, Thorn said, he's already chosen. Don't listen to him, Deckard said quietly. He wants the detonator. Reyna's eyes darted toward the control console behind Thorn. A small device blinked green. Nuclear payload. No, something worse. A storage network rigged to blow. You trigger that and this whole valley goes up, she said. That's the point, Thorn replied. Better ashes than evidence. He lifted the detonator. A gunshot cracked the air. Thorn staggered, eyes wide, the detonator slipping from his hand. Smoke curled from Deckard's pistol. I made my choice, he said. The guards opened fire. Nolan and Reyna dove for cover, bullets shredding the air. Shadow lunged forward, pulling one man down. Reyna fired twice, 3 times, moving through the haze. The sound was deafening. Steel, smoke, screams, chaos. When it was over, Thorn lay motionless. The detonator cracked under Nolan's boot. Reyna stood panting, the air thick with smoke. Deckard was on his knees, blood soaking his side. Nolan dropped beside him. Stay with me. Deckard smiled faintly, eyes dimming. Told you some debts don't dissolve. His hand found Nolan's shoulder, then it fell still. Silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Shadow pressed against Nolan's knee, whining softly. Reyna stood back, chest aching. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, Nolan spoke, his voice quiet, steady. He was lost, but he found his way back. She nodded, swallowing hard. So did you. He looked up at her, eyes hollow but alive. Not yet. Outside, the first edge of dusk cut across the desert. Light filtered through the bunker cracks, turning the smoke gold. Reyna holstered her weapon, the weight of everything settling in. For a long time they stood there, 3 survivors and 1 ghost. And in that stillness, Reyna understood something that no mission could ever teach. War didn't end when the shooting stopped. It ended when someone decided to carry the truth forward. Sometimes that meant walking through fire. Sometimes it meant forgiving yourself for surviving. And sometimes it meant both. What happens after the gunfire stops? For a moment, Reyna thought the silence in the bunker meant it was over. But silence in places like this was never peace. It was the breath before collapse. The air vibrated. A low rumble rolled through the metal floor, deep and steady. Pipes along the ceiling began to groan. Somewhere deep below, a detonation chain had started. "Run," Nolan said quietly. The single word broke the trance. Reyna turned, grabbed Deckard's shoulder. His body was limp. She froze. Nolan's hand closed around her arm. "Reyna." Her throat tightened. "We can't leave him. He's gone." Another tremor hit harder. Dust rained down like ash. Lights flickered one by one. Shadow barked once, urgent, commanding. Reyna forced herself to move. She nodded once, then followed Nolan through the smoke-filled corridor. The world behind them began to disintegrate. They sprinted through the tunnel, boots echoing against steel. The sound of explosions chased them, distant at first, then closer, louder, alive. The entire facility was tearing itself apart. Nolan led the way, Shadow at his heels, every turn a blur of debris and flame. Reyna's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she kept moving. The heat grew unbearable. The tunnel's walls glowed red. Then light ahead. The exit. Nolan hit the hatch first, slammed his shoulder against it. It didn't move. Again. Metal groaned. Reyna joined him, throwing her weight into it. Together they forced it open just as the blast wave hit. They burst into the desert, thrown into the dirt by the shockwave. The ground buckled. A roar split the air as fire erupted from the bunker mouth, orange and black, climbing toward the sky like something alive. Reyna rolled onto her back, coughing, staring up at the swirling smoke that bled into dusk. The heat kissed her face, the taste of metal thick on her tongue. Nolan sat beside her, chest heaving. Shadow circled once, then lay between them, his fur singed, his breathing steady. For a while none of them spoke. The only sound was the wind. Finally Reyna whispered, "He did it, didn't he?" Deckard stopped it. Nolan nodded slowly. "He did." She looked at him, at the exhaustion in his face, the soot smeared across his skin, the weight in his eyes. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't even relieved. Just still. "He saved us," she said softly. Nolan's voice was quiet. He owed the world something, and he paid it. Reyna turned back toward the burning crater. The orange glow pulsed like a heartbeat against the horizon. Somewhere in that inferno lay the proof, the evidence Thorn had tried to bury. But so did Deckard's body. "Was it worth it?" she asked. Nolan didn't answer right away. The question wasn't meant for him alone. Finally he said he thought so. They sat there until the fire began to fade, until the desert returned to its quiet indifference. When they finally stood, the night had swallowed the sky. "We can't stay," Nolan said. "If Thorn had a failsafe, there'll be more coming." Reyna wiped her face with a trembling hand. "Where do we go?" He looked east, toward the faint glow of civilization. Somewhere the truth can breathe. They started walking. Shadow padded ahead, his silhouette cutting through the darkness like a guardian. Every step away from the blast felt heavier than the one before. For hours they moved in silence, guided by starlight and instinct. The desert was cold now, cold enough to hurt. The adrenaline had burned out, leaving only the raw ache of survival. When Reyna finally spoke, her voice was low. "You said Thorn built something bigger, that this wasn't the end." "It isn't," Nolan said. "Yucca was one site, he'll have others." "Then we tell someone, the feds, the press, someone who will listen." He stopped walking. The wind carried his silence for a moment before he said, "And what happens when they do?" She looked at him, anger flaring beneath the exhaustion. "Then we make them listen." His eyes met hers, calm and sharp. "You sound like me now." She gave a faint smile. "Guess you're a bad influence." Shadow barked once, softly, like he approved. They reached the truck near midnight. It was half buried in dust but still functional. Nolan started the engine. The hum felt alive, grounding. They drove toward the faint lights of a service town miles away. Reyna leaned her head against the window, watching the stars slide by. Her mind kept replaying Deckard's last words, the look on his face, the silence that followed. He wasn't a villain at the end. He was just tired like all of them. When they finally stopped, it was at a truck stop off a forgotten highway. One diner, two pumps, and the kind of stillness only found in places the world had already moved past. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting pale halos on the linoleum. The air smelled of coffee and old stories. They sat in the far booth. Shadow curled beneath the table, head resting on Nolan's boot. The waitress poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. "Rough night," she said, eyeing the dust on their clothes. Nolan gave a faint smile. "Long drive." When she left, Reyna wrapped her hands around the cup. The warmth felt unreal after the cold outside. "So what now?" she asked quietly. Nolan stirred his coffee but didn't drink it. "We find Thorn's network. The files Deckard pulled. He copied data to multiple servers. He told me once he always kept a dead man's switch. If we find that, we find everything." "And you think Thorn's still alive?" Nolan's jaw flexed. "Men like him don't die easy." Reyna looked down at the table, tracing a ring left by the coffee mug. "We could disappear, you know. Walk away, start over." He looked at her for a long moment. "Could you?" She smiled faintly. "No." "Me neither," he said. They sat in silence again, letting the hum of the diner fill the empty spaces. Outside, the wind had died. The desert, for once, seemed to be sleeping. After a while, Reyna spoke again. "You ever wonder what it's all for? The fighting, the running, the losses?" Nolan's gaze drifted toward the window. "Every day." And then I remembered Deckard's face when he pulled that trigger." Reyna followed his gaze. Outside, the horizon was starting to pale, the first hint of morning. "He chose to stop the chain." "He did," Nolan said, "and so can we." They paid the bill and stepped back into the cool dawn. The sky was wide, the kind of endless blue that felt like a promise. Nolan knelt beside Shadow, scratching behind his ear. "Good boy," he said softly. The dog pressed against him, tail thumping once. Reyna watched them, something tightening in her chest, something between admiration and fear. She'd seen soldiers before, broken ones, brave ones, but this man was different. He wasn't fighting for orders anymore. He was fighting for something invisible, something he might never win. When he stood, she said, "You don't have to do this alone." He looked at her, sunlight catching the scars on his face. "Neither do you." For a long moment, they just stood there. Two people who had walked through fire and found something worth saving on the other side. Then he smiled, not the ghost of a smile he usually wore, but a real one. Small, quiet, human. "Come on," he said. "We've got work to do." They drove east, away from the wreckage, toward a future still covered in dust. As the miles passed, Reyna stared out the window and thought about all the names written in silence, people who'd fought, lost, disappeared, and been forgotten. She wondered if that was their fate too. Maybe, but maybe not. Because she still believed in something she couldn't quite name, a force that wasn't justice or vengeance, but something older, something that lived in people who refused to quit. And as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of night, she found herself whispering under her breath. For him, for all of them. Nolan glanced over. What? She shook her head. Nothing. But she smiled, a small, tired smile that felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. They stopped that night in an abandoned rest area overlooking the valley. The truck engine ticked as it cooled. The stars above were brutal in their beauty, endless, cold, pure. Reyna sat on the hood, watching the horizon. You ever think about going home? She asked. Nolan leaned beside her, arms crossed. Home, a direction, not a place. She nodded slowly. Maybe, but maybe we find it again someday. He looked at her, and for once there was no mask, no mission, no armor, just the truth. Maybe, he said. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of the desert breathing, soft, eternal. And in that fragile stillness, surrounded by ghosts and grit and the lingering taste of survival, Reyna understood what she hadn't before. War doesn't end when you stop fighting. It ends when you stop running from who you are. And sometimes, just sometimes, survival is the bravest act of all. How much truth can one heart carry before it breaks? Reyna asked herself that as the truck rolled east under a slate-blue sky. The desert behind them had swallowed the night's fire, but she still felt it in her bones, the echo of explosions, the weight of Deckard's last breath. Every mile they drove seemed to push them further from safety and closer to something neither of them could name. The radio stayed silent. The wind through the half-broken window was their only company. Nolan's hand stayed steady on the wheel, his eyes forward, his thoughts buried somewhere unreachable. Finally, Reyna said quietly, You ever wonder what happens when the good ones lose? He didn't look at her. Depends how you define losing. Like dying for nothing. He exhaled slowly. Nobody dies for nothing if somebody remembers why. She looked at him, the faint light cutting across his face. That's not hope talking, that's guilt. He almost smiled. Sometimes they're the same thing. The highway stretched into infinity, cracked, faded, dotted with signs that had lost their color. She stared out the window, letting his words settle. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him she was done fighting invisible wars. But the truth was she was. When you've spent your life chasing monsters, you don't stop just because they're hiding in different shadows. Where are we headed? She asked. Reno first, he said. Deckard's dead man's switch was digital. If he set up backups, he would have hidden them under something he trusted. Military servers. He shook his head. Personal, civilian. Deckard used to talk about an old friend, cyber division out of Carson City. Guy owed him favors. If those files exist, that's where they'll be. Reyna frowned. And if Thorne's people are already there? Nolan's voice was calm. Then we're too late. Shadows stirred in the back seat, tail thumping once, sensing the shift in their mood. Reyna reached back, resting a hand on his head. The warmth grounded her in ways words couldn't. After a while, she said, You ever get tired of saving people who don't know they need saving? He glanced at her, eyes unreadable. All the time. Then why keep doing it? He paused before answering. Because if I stop, then people like Thorne already won. It was such a simple answer. Too simple. But it was the kind that stuck in your ribs, the kind that made you realize belief didn't always need to be logical. Sometimes belief just needed to hurt. They reached Reno by dawn. The city was quiet, washed in soft orange light. A half-burned "Welcome to Nevada" sign leaned crooked by the highway. They found the building, an abandoned tech warehouse with broken glass windows and a faded government seal still clinging to its door. Nolan parked behind the loading bay. "Stay sharp," he said. If Deckard was right, Thorne's already scrubbing. Reyna drew her pistol, checking the chamber. "Then let's make him late." Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint hum of dormant machines. Rows of old servers blinked weakly in the dark. The floor was littered with paper, cables, and the ghosts of 1,000 forgotten secrets. Shadow moved ahead, sniffing the air, ears perked. He stopped near the far corner and growled softly. Nolan followed, his flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the gloom. There, a figure slumped against a rack of drives. Male, civilian clothes, dead for hours. Reyna crouched beside the body. A small badge hung from his belt. SLARSCN, Cyber Operations Consultant. "He was Deckard's contact," she murmured. Nolan knelt beside her, eyes narrowing. "Shot clean, execution style." Reyna's stomach tightened. "Thorne got here first." Nolan stood, scanning the servers. "Not all of them." "What do you mean?" "Look." He pointed at a terminal still running, faint blue light pulsing in the dark. A progress bar flickered across the screen. "Upload 82% complete." Reyna moved closer. "It's transferring something." Nolan's voice was low. "Deckard's files." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The system was encrypted, but she knew her way around digital locks. She'd done counterintel during her service. The interface was crude but familiar. "Destination?" Nolan asked. She froze. "Washington, a government relay node." Nolan's jaw tightened. He wasn't just exposing Thorne, he was exposing everyone. Lines of text scrolled across the monitor, contract names, serials, timestamps. Weapons shipments tagged not just to Thorne's company, but to multiple defense contractors, private investors, even politicians. The rot wasn't underground. It was above them the entire time. Reyna stepped back, pulse pounding. This isn't just corruption, it's infrastructure." Nolan stared at the screen. Deckard found the root, Thorne was just a branch. The upload hit 98%. Then the lights went out. The monitor flickered once and died. Reyna swore under her breath. "No, no, no." A voice echoed through the darkness, distorted through the building's old speakers. "You shouldn't have come here, detective." Reyna froze. "Marlowe." The name came out like a curse. Her partner's voice, calm, smooth, unmistakable. "You always had good instincts," he said. "Shame they didn't include knowing when to quit." Nolan motioned toward the door. "Move." They darted between server racks, low and fast. Footsteps echoed from the entryway, heavy, tactical. Flashlights cut through the dark. The metallic click of safeties disengaging filled the air. Marlowe's voice followed them. "You think you can leak this? You think anyone will believe a burned-out cop and a dead soldier?" Reyna felt her throat tighten. "You betrayed me for this." "For survival," Marlowe said. "You think we get to choose which side wins? There's only one side now, the one that pays." Nolan whispered, "We have to get that data out." "Power's gone," Reyna said. "Servers locked." He handed her a small drive. "Then pull it manually." She hesitated. "You think there's time?" "Make time." He stepped out of cover, rifle raised, moving toward the sound of approaching footsteps. Shadow stayed with him, a ghost of muscle and loyalty in the flickering dark. Reyna turned back to the server, working fast. Sparks fell from a blown fuse. Every sound made her heart skip. Her hands moved on instinct, cable, drive, execute, override. Footsteps, gunfire, the sharp bark of Shadow. Nolan's voice, distant. "Reyna, move." The system beeped. "Transfer successful." She ripped the drive free and sprinted toward the exit. Gunfire erupted again, close now. Sparks danced along the walls. She saw Marlowe through the haze, rifle up, eyes cold. For a heartbeat, their gazes met. He smiled. "I told you to stay out of this." She fired first. The bullet caught his shoulder, spinning him back. He stumbled, fired once, missed. Nolan's return shot hit him center mass. He collapsed against the doorframe, disbelief carved across his face. Reyna stopped beside the body, breathing hard. "You could have walked away." Marlowe coughed blood, eyes dimming. "So could you." Then he was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Reyna stood there, shaking, smoke curling around her. Nolan lowered his weapon, eyes unreadable. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded once. "No, but it'll do." He gave the smallest nod. "Let's get out of here." They stepped into the dawn light. The building smoldered behind them, a mausoleum for lies. The drive in Reyna's hand felt heavier than it should have, heavier than a gun, heavier than guilt. "What's on it?" she asked. "Everything," Nolan said. "Enough to burn down a kingdom." She stared at the rising sun, its light reflecting off the small silver casing. "And what do we do with it?" He looked east toward the horizon. "That depends. Do you still believe in the system?" She didn't answer right away. She thought about the officers who'd turned away, the brass who'd silenced her reports, the man she'd once called partner. She thought about Deckard dying in fire just to reveal what everyone already suspected. "No," she said finally, "but I still believe in truth." Nolan nodded. "Then we find someone who will listen." They got back in the truck, shadow curling up behind them. The road ahead was long, winding through the canyons like a scar. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist, but it didn't bring warmth, only clarity. Reyna looked at Nolan, the faint reflection of light in his eyes. "You think we'll make it?" He gave a small, quiet smile. "We already did." She smiled too, tired but real. Behind them, the warehouse collapsed into dust, burying another secret that the world would never know. But the truth was no longer buried. It was sitting in the glove compartment, humming quietly, waiting for a decision. And as they drove into the rising light, Reyna felt something strange, not relief, not joy, but a fragile peace. Sometimes survival isn't about outliving the darkness. Sometimes it's about carrying the light long enough for someone else to see it. What happens after the truth finally comes out? Reyna didn't know, not really. All she knew was that the silence in the truck felt heavier than gunfire. The sun hung low over the desert highway, bleeding gold across the windshield. Miles stretched ahead, endless and bright, but all she could see in her mind was the flash drive sitting in the glove compartment. The one thing worth killing for, the one thing that could burn everything down. Deckard's last act. Nolan's burden. Her choice now. The world didn't stop for truth. It never did. But she wondered maybe this time it could flinch. "Washington's a long drive," she murmured. Nolan's voice was quiet. "We won't make it that far." She looked at him. "Why not?" "Because they'll be waiting before we hit the state line." He kept his eyes on the road, steady. "Thorne, not dead. Men like him don't die in the same explosion twice. He'll have backups, contingencies, people already moving." Reyna exhaled, slow and bitter. "Then what? We run again." "No," he said, "we end it." She studied him, the lines carved by years of service, of guilt, of ghosts he still hadn't buried. His expression wasn't anger or fear, it was resolve. The quiet kind that came from men who already accepted they might not walk away. "End it how?" she asked. He reached over and tapped the glove compartment. "By finishing what Deckard started." Reyna opened it. The flash drive gleamed like a relic in the fading light. "You know what happens when this goes public," she said softly. "Half the defense industry, senators, contractors, command, they'll all come down with it." Nolan nodded. "Good." "And us?" He smiled faintly. "Collateral." She looked at the drive again. It felt heavier than anything she'd ever carried, not because of its size, but because it held everything she'd lost faith in. Every betrayal, every name erased for convenience, every ghost no one bothered to remember. "We'll need a signal strong enough to upload this before they find us," she said. "I know a place," Nolan replied. "High ground. Old Air Force comms relay in the Sierras. Still has an uplink line. Deckard and I used it years ago." "How far?" "6 hours." Reyna nodded. "Then we move." They reached the mountains by nightfall. The road twisted upward, narrow and broken. The headlights cut through the fog in sharp cones. Each turn felt like driving through another lifetime. The city lights far below fading until there was only wilderness and wind. Shadow lifted his head, whining softly. Even he could feel it, the air changing. Thinner, colder, expectant. Reyna checked her watch. "You think Thorne's men tracked us?" "They will," Nolan said, "but not before we send it. Assuming the relay still works." He gave her a look. "I don't believe in assumptions. I believe in timing." They pulled into the clearing near the peak just as the first drops of rain began to fall. The old communication tower stood crooked against the sky, its rusted frame slicing into the clouds. It looked dead, forgotten, perfect. Reyna grabbed her gear, the flash drive secure in her jacket. Nolan slung his rifle over his shoulder, scanning the tree line with that same quiet intensity. "Shadow," he said softly. The dog padded forward, nose to the ground, every step silent. He was more than an animal. He was instinct, loyalty, and warning all in one body. "Let's move," Nolan said. They climbed the narrow metal stairs, the wind clawing at their jackets. The higher they went, the louder the world became, the storm growing, thunder rolling like artillery in the distance. At the top, the small control shed sat half-collapsed, its door hanging by one hinge. Inside, the air smelled of rust and ozone. Reyna found the console dead, but the backup power module still hummed faintly. She plugged in the drive. The old screen flickered once, twice, then came alive. "Deckard," she whispered, almost smiling, "you beautiful bastard." The upload window appeared, progress bar crawling forward. "Upload 4%. Nolan stood at the doorway, scanning the forest below. The valley stretched out like a dark ocean, no lights, no movement, but he could feel it too. That pressure in the air, the way the night held its breath. "How long?" he asked. 10 minutes if we're lucky." "We're not." She almost smiled. "You always this positive." He glanced back. "Always this realistic." "Upload 22%. The rain hit harder. Wind screamed through the tower's frame. Thunder cracked so close it shook the structure. And then Shadow growled. Nolan's head snapped up. His eyes followed the dog's stare toward the tree line. Movement. Headlights flickered in the distance, faint, weaving through the trees. A convoy, 3 vehicles. "They found us," Nolan said. "How long?" Reyna asked, fingers flying over the console. "Minutes." She looked at him, then back at the screen. "Upload 38%. "We hold here," Nolan said, "by the time we need." She met his eyes. "And if we don't have it?" "Then we make it." He moved down the stairs, rifle raised, Shadow at his side. Reyna wanted to call him back, to tell him they'd come too far to lose each other now, but the words died in her throat. He was already gone, swallowed by the storm. She turned back to the console, watching the numbers crawl upward. Upload 41%, 46%, 52%. Gunfire echoed below, muffled by rain, flashes of light cutting through the fog. She could hear Nolan's rifle, precise, methodical. For every round that cracked, she knew it meant another man wouldn't climb those stairs. But there were too many. Upload 63%. Shadow barked once, sharp, defiant, then a scream tore through the noise. Reyna's hands froze on the keyboard. "Nolan!" No answer, just the storm. She forced herself to breathe, to focus. 68%, 74%. The console beeped angrily as the signal flickered. She rerouted the uplink, fighting interference. Come on, she whispered. 81%, 88%. A figure burst through the doorway, wet, bleeding, breathing hard. Nolan. He slammed the door behind him, locking it with a steel rod. 2 trucks down, he said between breaths. More coming. Shadow limped in after him, fur slick with rain, one ear torn but alive. Reyna turned back to the screen. 94%, 97%. And then black. The power died. No, she shouted, slamming her fist against the console. The screen stayed dark. The storm had killed the grid. Nolan moved beside her, scanning the dead system. Back up. Batteries fried. He looked at the tower's generator, old, cracked, half-rusted. Then at the live cable running into the floor. I can jump it, he said. That'll blow it. He met her eyes. Exactly. Understanding hit her. You'll fry yourself with it. Maybe, maybe not. Lightning flared outside, illuminating his face, calm, steady, resolute. Nolan, she said softly, you don't have to do this. He gave a faint smile. I already did. Before she could stop him, he grabbed the cable, stripped the end with his knife, and jammed it into the generator's terminal. Sparks exploded. The smell of ozone filled the air. The console screamed back to life. Reyna flinched, the light washing over her face. Upload 98%, 99%. Nolan's body jerked once, electricity crawling up his arm, but he didn't let go. Finish it, he shouted through clenched teeth. Reyna hit the final key. Upload complete. The screen flashed green. The file was gone, sent, replicated, mirrored across half a dozen servers around the world. The truth was free now. Untouchable. Reyna pulled the cable free. Nolan collapsed to his knees, smoke curling from the burned sleeve of his jacket. Shadow pressed against him, whining low, licking his hand. Nolan. I'm fine, he said hoarsely, though his voice was barely there. You get it out. She nodded, tears mixing with rain. It's done. He gave a weak smile. Then it was worth it. They sat there for a moment, both breathing hard, both drenched, both alive in ways that didn't feel real. The storm began to fade, leaving only the hiss of rain against steel. Reyna leaned against the console, staring at the faint glow of the finished upload screen. They'll come for us, she whispered. I know, he said. What happens then? He looked at her, eyes calm, the faintest trace of peace in them. Then we let the truth do what it's supposed to. She nodded slowly. You think anyone will believe it? Doesn't matter anymore, he said. It's out there, that's enough. He looked down at Shadow, scratched behind his ear. The dog's tail thumped once, weak but steady. Then Nolan said something she'd never forget, not because of the words, but because of how quiet they were. You tell them he wasn't the villain. Who? She asked softly. Deckard, he said. He just got lost. Happens to all of us. Rain dripped through the cracks in the ceiling. The storm moved east, leaving the world washed clean, or as clean as it could be. Reyna sat beside him, both of them staring out at the endless valley below. The lights of distant cities flickered faintly, oblivious to what had just changed. Somewhere out there, men would wake to headlines they never expected. Careers would burn, secrets would die, the machine would grind, maybe even stall. And maybe, just maybe, someone would start asking the right questions. Reyna pulled the flash drive from her pocket, now empty of data. She turned it in her hand, a small, silent thing that had carried the weight of everything. She placed it beside Nolan on the floor. Sometimes, she said quietly, dignity doesn't speak. He looked at her. It simply acts. He smiled, a real one, tired and grateful. You'd make a hell of a soldier. She smiled back. "You make a decent cop." They sat there until the sun broke through the clouds, light spilling across the mountains, soft and endless. The storm was gone. The truth was out. And for the first time in years, Reyna didn't feel the urge to run. The world might not change overnight. Maybe it never would. But she had. And that was enough. Shadow barked once, sharp and alive, as if to mark the moment. They stood together, bruised, burned, breathing. And somewhere far below, in the quiet hum of 1,000 awakened networks, the truth began to spread, unseen, unstoppable, alive.